Freedom is not the final reward of life, but something we lost long ago, the moment we began to believe we had to earn it. I once believed the opposite, that one day, after all the years of hard work, I would finally rest. One morning, I would wake up in a small house by the sea, sip my coffee, and smile to myself, no longer in a hurry. I called that my day of freedom. Every time I was exhausted, I comforted myself, saying just a little more effort, and the future will be gentle. But somehow, that future kept drifting farther away, like a fading shadow in the mist. We were taught that life is a linear journey. Study hard, find a stable job, climb the career ladder, save, invest, and finally retire. And then, we will be happy. It sounds reasonable, almost undeniable. But something feels wrong. If happiness lies at the end of the road, why don't we see those ahead of us, shining brighter, feeling freer? Why, after decades of labor, do so many only feel emptiness and fear when there is nothing left to do? I remember once, an old colleague told me that his father had just retired after more than 40 years working in engineering. All that time, he said he would travel, learn to play music, and grow a little garden after retirement. But only a few months later, he spent hours sitting silently in his room, staring out the window, never starting anything. "It's like my father forgot how to live," he said, his voice trembling. That story haunted me for years, like an omen for all of us, those who keep racing against time without knowing where we are running to. Modern society has turned freedom into a luxury prize, a golden ticket granted only to those who work hard, sacrifice, and obediently follow the rules. Phrases like, "Work hard now, enjoy later," "Work while you're young, so you won't suffer later," or "Prepare for a peaceful old age," sound wise, but hidden beneath them is a dangerous belief that the present is not worth living, that happiness must be postponed. And so, day after day, we trade away the most precious moments of our lives to buy a future that may never come. Few realize this truth. The idea of retirement, the very thing our culture worships, was never born from kindness. It was a political strategy. Over a century ago in Germany, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck proposed a pension system for the elderly. But at that time, the average lifespan was only about 60 years. In other words, most people never lived long enough to enjoy that freedom. The real goal was to clear the workforce for the younger generation. Gradually, that idea spread, wrapped in the glittering cover of social welfare. It was exported, repackaged, and eventually became the new religion of the 20th century. From then on, retirement became the dream sold everywhere. Smiles on bank brochures, silver-haired couples holding hands by the sea, slogans saying, "Live the life you've dreamed of," all tell the same story. Work hard, save, invest, and one day you will be free. But they never say that most workers enter retirement with weary bodies, fading health, and empty minds. They never say that those golden years of enjoyment often last only a short decade before illness or loneliness knocks at the door. That truth is harsh, but no one wants to face it. So we keep busy, keep believing we are doing the right thing. We follow someone else's schedule, convinced that happiness belongs to the future. We skip family dinners for work, miss vacations for deadlines, postpone small dreams because it's not time yet. And year after year, we pour all our life into a box labeled someday. Alan Watts once said that life is not a journey to reach somewhere, but a dance. Every step is a moment of music, and the goal is not to arrive at the end, but to feel each beat while we are still moving. Yet we live as if happiness requires a rehearsal. We keep preparing for a performance that will never begin. If we stop and look closely, we will see a deep paradox. We chase freedom by binding ourselves. We trade time, health, and youth, the very essence of natural freedom, to buy a promised version of it in the future. We build walls around our lives, then comfort ourselves, saying this is the price we must pay before we can step outside. But those walls never open. I have seen that look in the eyes of the elderly as they reflect on their lives, a look filled with regret and disbelief that almost everything they did was preparation, not living. Some say, "I spent my whole life getting here, but now I don't know what to do with myself." That sentence chills the soul. It is not just the sadness of old age, but the echo of a generation stolen from the present. The frightening thing is not that we will die, but that we have never truly lived. We are lulled by beautiful promises, and when we awaken, we find ourselves at the end of the road, looking around and realizing we are nowhere to be found in it. Freedom is not ahead of us. It is right here, in this moment, in the breath we take, in the instant we truly know we exist. But to see that, we must have the courage to question what the whole world believes. Perhaps the right question is not, when will I be free? But when will I stop believing that freedom must wait until tomorrow? And maybe, only when we pause, in the midst of all our plans and worries, and look deeply into this very moment, will we realize that everything we have ever sought, peace, happiness, fulfillment, was never at the end of the road. It is here, in this present moment, waiting for us to return. Because freedom does not begin when we retire. It begins when we stop postponing life. There is a paradox that few people ever notice. The concept of retirement, something millions consider the ultimate reward of life, was never created to liberate human beings. It was created to control them. If you look back at history, you will see that the so-called retirement dream was not a humanitarian gift of modern society, but a carefully designed tool to keep everyone in order. At the end of the 19th century, Otto von Bismarck, the German chancellor, was the first to introduce a state pension system. At that time, the average life expectancy was about 60, yet the retirement age was set at 65. This meant that most people would die before ever receiving a single pension payment. On the surface, the policy looked compassionate, caring for the elderly, sharing social burdens. But behind it was a subtle economic and political strategy, removing older workers from the system to make room for the young, while keeping the masses convinced they were being protected. From then on, the idea of retirement spread across the world like a new religion. Every nation, every economy, copied the model, painted it with a moral coating, and turned it into a symbol of progress. By the 20th century, the media, corporations, and governments together inflated this story into a collective dream. Work hard today to enjoy freedom tomorrow. A comforting promise, but one that made us willing slaves to the future. Generation after generation, people were taught that this is the right path. So the child is sent to school, learns to compete, earns high grades, and chooses a stable career. It grows up believing that its value lies in serving that machine. Then, as an adult, it becomes responsible, pays debts, pays taxes, and saves. Year after year, decade after decade, it lives through a chain of goals, promotions, buying a house, investing, and finally, retiring. Everything sounds so logical that it seems impossible to question. But pause for a moment and ask, why must freedom have conditions? Why must we work 40 years to earn the right to live gently? Who decided that happiness only belongs to those who wait? The answer, if we dare to face it, is no one. There is no natural law that says we must sacrifice the present for the future. It is simply a story society tells itself, a mechanism to maintain productivity. An economy can only survive when people believe they are not enough, that they must keep striving to reach an imagined state. Freedom becomes the carrot hanging in front of us, keeping us running endlessly, even when we are exhausted. Notice how every image of retirement in advertisements looks the same. A smiling gray-haired couple walking on the beach, golden sunlight, cocktails in hand. They look happy, healthy, and of course, wealthy. But that image is built to sell you a dream. No one says that most retirees don't have enough money to live comfortably, or that their health has declined so much they can no longer do what they once promised themselves. No one mentions the loneliness, the loss of purpose, or the long, empty days many face after leaving their jobs. It is ironic to realize that we spend our entire lives preparing for a future that most will never fully enjoy. Meanwhile, each passing day, the very days we are sacrificing, is real life itself. We keep waiting to begin living, without realizing that we are already living in the waiting. There is a recurring finding in many psychological studies. The rate of depression and feelings of emptiness rise sharply among those who have just retired, not because they lack money or time, but because they have lost what once defined them, their work. When work disappears, many suddenly no longer know who they are. That sense of emptiness is deep and cold, like an empty room. Alan Watts once warned about what he called the deferred life plan. We treat the present as a temporary stage, merely a preparation for a better future. But when that future comes, it rarely brings what we expected. Because during the waiting, we have trained ourselves not to live. We have become skilled at postponing happiness, at delaying joy. So skilled that when we are finally allowed to rest, we no longer know what to do with the freedom we have bought. And the crueler truth is this: society needs it that way. An economy driven by productivity cannot survive if people know how to enjoy the present. If everyone felt enough, who would buy more, work more, strive more? That is why the promise of a brighter tomorrow must always be kept alive, not to free you, but to keep you running in circles. Think of a middle-aged worker. He wakes up every morning, drives to the factory, works 8 hours, and returns home tired. He tells his son, "I do this for your future." He tells his wife, "When I retire, we'll travel." But deep inside, there is a small voice. A part of him knows he is missing something. He remembers the mornings of his 20s, when he dreamed of painting, of learning music, when he believed life could be more colorful. But now, those dreams are sealed in a small box, labeled someday. And someday never arrives. We cannot blame him. He is only living out the script that society has written. But that is the problem. Almost everyone is acting in the same play, without realizing they are a supporting character in their own story. Perhaps the scariest thing is not working hard all our lives, but working all our lives for a dream that isn't ours. When we place our faith in a collective promise that one day we will be free, we unknowingly hand over the right to define freedom itself to others. And when we finally reach the destination, we no longer know what to do with it. True freedom is never given. It does not live in a bank account, in a pension, or in a travel schedule. It is a state of mind, the feeling that we are alive right now without waiting for any condition. But the irony is that most of us are taught to do the opposite, to sacrifice the present in exchange for a version of the future drawn by someone else. The question is no longer, when will I get to rest? But why must I wait to live? Because maybe that very waiting is the chain that holds us back. If we are brave enough to face the truth, we may see that freedom is not stolen by governments, by bosses, or by the times. It is stolen by our own beliefs. The belief that freedom is a reward, not a birthright. The belief that happiness is a result, not a process. And when we understand this, we begin to see small cracks forming in the seemingly solid wall of the system. We realize that every promise of a brighter tomorrow only has power as long as we keep trading away today. Maybe true awakening begins the moment we ask ourselves, if no one told me I had to wait, how would I live right now? Because freedom is not at the end of the road. It begins the moment we stop walking someone else's path. There is a strange moment in life when a person realizes that everything they once chased no longer makes them feel alive. It does not strike like lightning, but seeps in quietly, on an ordinary morning when you wake up and find no clear reason to get out of bed. That feeling often comes after a big victory, a milestone you thought you had been waiting for your whole life. Graduation, promotion, or even retirement. And in that moment, you understand that the promised freedom was only a shadow. Many people lose their way after leaving work. At first, there are a few weeks of enjoyment, a few months of rest, and then, slowly, emptiness. No more emails, no more colleagues, no more back-to-back meetings. Suddenly, they do not know who they are anymore. A major study from the U.S. National Institute on Aging found that depression rates rise nearly 40% among new retirees, not because they lack money or time, but because they lose the sense of existing. When work disappears, meaning fades with it, that sounds cruel, but it is deeply human. For decades, we have been defined by the roles we play: teacher, engineer, doctor, manager. These titles become the mirrors we look into each morning, proof that we matter. When the mirror breaks, we do not just lose a job, we lose the face we once recognized as our own. We look around the house, and the quiet walls reflect back an emptiness we cannot name. Alan Watts once described life as a dance, with no destination, no ending, only steps to feel. But most of us do not know how to dance. We only know how to run. We run from one thing to another, from today to tomorrow, from youth to old age, always chasing a distant, someday. And along the way, we lose the ability to enjoy what is happening right now. We forget that the music is still playing. I once met a man in his 60s, a former senior executive at a large company. He had spent his whole life working, long nights under the office lights, endless business trips, dinners missed with family. "I promised my wife that when I retired, we would travel across Italy," he told me. "But by the time I finally had the time, she no longer had the health." His voice trembled, as if every word awakened 100 memories. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was preparing for happiness. But maybe I was only postponing it forever. Those words filled the room with silence. I will never forget his eyes, not burning with regret, but heavy with realization. The realization that life owes us no perfect phase. It simply happens, moment by moment, and we either live it or we lose it. The frightening truth is that most of us are somewhere along his path, just not at the end yet. We delay joy for what seems like good reasons. "I'm doing this for my family. After this project, I'll rest. When the kids grow up, I'll make time for myself." But like a curse, when always lives ahead of us. We build our entire lives around an unfinished sentence. Ask yourself, do you remember the last time you truly felt an ordinary afternoon? No rush, no goal. Just being, watching the light shift on the wall, hearing the wind move through the window. If it takes growing old to live that way, maybe we never really understood what freedom means. Many believe that retirement is the doorway to peace. But true peace never comes from stopping. It comes from knowing where you are. Some retire and still feel trapped. Some work their whole lives and yet live free every day because they have learned how to be present. Freedom is not in circumstances, but in awareness, in how we inhabit each moment we live. And perhaps that is why Alan Watts said, "This right now is it. There is no rehearsal for life, no other moment waiting ahead to finally begin. There is only this present one, fragile, alive, and ready to disappear at any time." If you are hearing these words, maybe somewhere inside you also feel something similar. A quiet, persistent whisper that says, "You have waited too long." Maybe it is the painting you have not painted, the book you have not written, the call you have not made, or simply the morning you have not allowed yourself to rest. If so, try this. Share what you feel, not for algorithms, not for approval, but because the real part of you needs to speak. Leave a word, even just a few, like gently tapping on the silent wall of routine. Because sometimes that small act, admitting that you are alive, listening, wanting to change, is the first step back to yourself. You see, we are not imprisoned by our schedules, but by the belief that only when everything is done can we enjoy life. But done is an illusion. Life is never complete, always unfinished, always waiting for something. If we keep waiting until everything is settled to live, we will never live at all. There are people who leave this world still waiting for their children's success, waiting to pay off debts, waiting for a perfect vacation, waiting for the right time. But that right time has never existed. The only real moment is this one, right now, where you are breathing, hearing, and feeling. A friend once told me, "I don't want to retire from work. I want to retire from fear." That sentence left me in silence for a long time, because perhaps that is the true essence of freedom. Not escaping work, but escaping the illusion that happiness must wait for perfection. If we cannot find peace in an ordinary day, we will not find it at the end of the road. Because freedom is not a reward, it is the way we walk. And maybe awakening begins right here, in this very moment, when we finally stop waiting to live. There is one thing most of us are never taught. Work does not just feed us, it slowly consumes us. When we stay too long in one role, that role begins to cling to our skin, until one day we no longer know who we are without it. We do not just go to work, we become our work. I once knew a woman named Helen, a high school teacher for 35 years. She loved her job, she was diligent and devoted. But when the school gave her retirement papers, Helen grew unusually quiet. She no longer knew what to do each morning, had no one to tell stories to, no students to care for. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said, looking down at her trembling hands. "I'm not a mother now. My children are grown. I'm not a teacher anymore. All that's left is me, and I don't know how to live with that person." Her words sounded sad, yet they revealed a truth so common it almost goes unnoticed. We are taught to define ourselves by titles, by usefulness. As children, we are praised when we achieve high grades, when we behave, when we are helpful. As adults, we are respected when we work hard, when we stay busy, when we succeed. Gradually, we tie our self-worth to what we do instead of who we are. And in doing so, work becomes a new religion, and the office a chapel where we kneel every day. The irony is that the harder we try to prove our worth through labor, the more we fear stillness. Many people cannot bear silence after retirement. They feel guilty when doing nothing, as if breaking a sacred rule. Some take on part-time jobs, not for money, but to escape the feeling of uselessness. Others fill their days with trivial tasks just to avoid hearing the quiet within. We have been programmed to believe that rest is a reward for effort, not a natural right. But when that reward finally comes, we do not know what to do with it. The silence we once dreamed of becomes a mirror reflecting emptiness, because somewhere along the way, we lost touch with ourselves. I once found a line in my father's old notebook. He had worked as an engineer his whole life. It said, "If I'm not working, I don't know what I exist for." The words were scribbled hastily, but they stayed with me. My father was not alone in feeling that way. Many people are like him, measuring their worth through productivity. They forget that human beings were not born to produce. We were born to feel, to create, to love, to live. But when productivity becomes the measure of dignity, we turn ourselves into tools in our own lives. For over a century, society has praised productivity as a virtue. Hard work became a sign of morality, while rest was seen as laziness. It is the inheritance of the industrial age, where people were valued by output, by numbers, by end-of-day reports. The cost of that is not only exhaustion, but corruption of the soul. We forget the human part of ourselves. Even on rare days off, we do not truly rest. We still check our phones, still think about work, still feel the need to do something. When we are not busy, we grow uneasy, as if stripped of our identity. The modern world has taught us that being busy equals being valuable. But when busyness becomes the measure of meaning, we no longer know how to live without a schedule. I once saw a young father sitting beside his son, constantly glancing at his phone. He said he worked hard to give his child a better future. But the child did not need that future. He needed his father now. Every message the man answered, every call he took, was a moment he could never reclaim. Life slips away not through grand decisions, but through small ones like these. Like Helen, like my father, we all grew up inside the same story. Work hard, and happiness will come. But happiness never comes, because it was never in the future. It lives in the quiet afternoon spent with someone you love, in a meal unhurried, in a breath where you pause to feel the wind on your skin. These moments never required you to earn them. They were always here. We were simply too busy to notice. When we tie our identity entirely to our work, the relationships around us become secondary. We tell those we love, "I do this for you." We tell our children, "I work so you won't struggle later." But in the process, we lose the very people we are working for. Children grow up faster than we think. Parents grow old in silence. And those we love slowly learn to live without us. A 75-year Harvard study once revealed that the single greatest predictor of happiness and health is not wealth or status, but the quality of our relationships. Those with close bonds, friendships, love, connection, live longer, healthier, and happier lives. The truth is simple, almost embarrassingly so. We do not need more achievements. We need more connection. And yet, we keep choosing the opposite. A friend once asked me, "Do you ever feel like you're living as if life were a project?" I stayed silent for a long time, because I knew that question was for all of us. We live as if trying to complete something, forgetting there is no final draft. Life is not a project with a handover date. It is a piece of music, and if we only count the notes, we will never hear the melody. Alan Watts once compared life to music. We don't play music to reach the end, but to enjoy each note. Yet most of us live like hurried musicians, rushing toward the final bar called retirement. And when the song ends, we realize we never truly listened. The cost of living to work is not only exhaustion, it is losing the ability to be present. We are no longer inside our moments. Those we love see our bodies, but our minds remain elsewhere, trapped in projects, in goals, in future plans. Perhaps what we need to learn is not how to work less, but how to live more fully in whatever we do, to truly see the steam rising from a cup of coffee, to listen completely when someone speaks, to rest without guilt. Because that is the foundation of freedom. Not freedom from work, but freedom from the self that constantly demands to prove its worth. And only when we face this truth can we finally see clearly. We do not need to retire to begin living. We only need to stop identifying ourselves with what we do, so we can start existing as who we truly are. There is an illness more silent than exhaustion, more dangerous than the fear of failure. It does not strike us down all at once, but slowly drains our life force day by day with its soft, convincing whispers. Your time will come later, when things are more stable. It is the illness of those who live in the future, and almost all of us are suffering from it. Notice how we always believe happiness lies ahead. When we are students, we look forward to graduation. When we start working, we look forward to promotions, raises, vacations. And when we achieve those things, we look forward to the next. Our whole life becomes a chain of milestones not yet reached, as if every morning we wake up not to live, but to move one step closer to a glorious day no one is sure will ever come. Alan Watts once said that modern man is like a donkey chasing a carrot tied in front of its nose. The carrot represents the future, and the donkey never catches it. We are the same, always tired, always waiting, yet afraid to stop. Because if we stop, we must face the truth that there was never a carrot at all, only an invisible string we tied around our own neck. I once met a man named Richard in his early 50s. He worked in finance, his life comfortable, but his eyes carried a quiet fatigue. When I asked what made him so weary, he gave a faint smile. "It's not the work," he said. "It's the thought that I'm still not there yet." Though he had a home, money, and reputation, a single question kept echoing in his mind. "What's next?" He said, "I don't know how to stop. When I'm on vacation, I still check my email. When I'm home, I still think about the numbers. I've spent my whole life planning for the future, and now the future is the only thing I don't know how to live with." We live in a culture that worships tomorrow. It teaches us to see the present as nothing but a stepping stone. We plan everything, our finances, our careers, our relationships, as if we could control time. But time does not listen. It moves on, quietly, second by second, no matter how perfect our plans may be. The irony is that the more we prepare for the future, the more we lose our ability to be here. When we eat, our minds think about what's next. When we rest, we feel guilty for not doing enough. When we are with someone we love, we are not really there. We are always somewhere else. And so every moment of life becomes half-lived, every breath half-felt. Some ask, if I don't think about the future, how can I move forward? But the issue is not whether we have goals. It's whether we live for them or within them. The difference is subtle but profound. The climber who climbs to see the view will pause to breathe, to listen to the wind, to feel the sky. The climber who climbs only to reach the summit sees nothing but his own exhaustion, and when he reaches the top, he can only ask, now what? The disease of living in the future does not only kill joy, it makes us addicted to waiting. Our brain becomes hooked on the feeling of almost there. It releases dopamine, giving us a temporary high. But once we reach the goal, the dopamine fades and emptiness returns. So we chase another goal and another. We spend our whole lives caught between expectation and disappointment. Once, I saw a woman sitting alone in a cafe, her laptop open, a cup of cappuccino beside her, the foam long dissolved. She wasn't looking around, not enjoying the moment, just typing and glancing at her watch. I thought she must be busy with an important project, but when I passed by again nearly an hour later, she was still there, in the same posture, the same expression. I realized she wasn't busy with work. She was busy avoiding stillness. I wondered, are we all like that? Afraid to stop, afraid of silence, afraid to face ourselves when there is nothing left to do. Because in that silence, we might hear the question we've been avoiding all along. If there's no next goal, who am I? The sad truth is, we were taught how to plan, but never how to live. We know how to set deadlines, but not how to listen to our own sighs. We understand the stock market, but not our own emotions. And then we wonder why happiness always seems delayed. But there's a way out of this loop, and it begins with one small act: awareness. Every time you hear yourself say later, pause and ask, why not now? When you say, when things are stable, ask, how do I define stable? When you think, I'll be happy someday, look around and see if happiness might already be here. In the sunlight, in the music, in a single breath. This doesn't mean giving up on goals, but learning to be present in each step along the way. Because perhaps what we're searching for is not at the destination, but in the feeling of walking itself. Alan Watts once said, "We are always waiting until we arrive. But when we arrive, we want to keep going." That is the tragedy of being human, never truly at home in the present. In truth, retirement is not just a stage of life. It is a state of mind. Anyone can retire right now, not from work, but from the habit of living in the future. Retire from the fear of missing out. Retire from waiting for life to begin. Imagine this. If you stopped believing that tomorrow is what matters most, what would change? Maybe you'd linger a little longer with your morning coffee. Maybe you'd call someone you've been meaning to get back to later. Maybe you'd step outside and feel the cold air on your skin for no reason at all. Maybe you'd realize that life has always been happening. You just weren't there to live it. We were taught that freedom is a reward of the future, but the truth is the opposite. Only when we return to the present do we become free. Because every chain in life is tied to the past or the future. But here, in this moment, where you are breathing, listening, existing, nothing holds you. Freedom is not the destination after a series of perfect plans. It is the ability to stop, look around, and say, I'm already here. If there is one thing modern people need to learn again from the beginning, it is the art of living in the present. Not the shallow kind of enjoyment that advertisements often preach, but a true presence still deep and conscious. Only when we learn to stay in this very moment can we touch what we have been chasing all along. The feeling of being alive. I once read a line in the journal of a man who had just survived a heart attack. He wrote, "I spent my whole life chasing the future, but in those 10 seconds when I thought it was over, all I wanted was one more ordinary morning." Simple words, yet they hold the truth we so often forget. The most precious things are not the peaks, but the ordinary days, the mornings when we wake without rushing, the afternoons when we simply sit still and listen to the wind passing through the window. We do not need to abandon our work, nor must we go searching for freedom somewhere far away. What we need is to redefine how we live from working to live to living while working. Some think this is a lofty philosophy, but it begins with the smallest acts. How we pour a cup of tea, how we listen to someone, how we take a deep breath without already thinking about what's next. One of the first steps is gratitude. Not forced gratitude, but the quiet recognition of the tiny pieces of joy already unfolding. The warmth of water on your hands as you wash the dishes, the smell of morning coffee, a kind word from someone. When you truly pay attention, you realize you have more than you thought. Gratitude does more than make you happier, it slows time. It stretches each minute, making it full and alive. Next comes mindfulness, intentional presence. It is not about trying to empty your mind, but about seeing things as they are, without judgment, without fixing. When washing your hands, just wash. When walking, just walk. When talking, just listen. It sounds simple, yet in a world filled with notifications, phones, and emails, it is a quiet revolution. And the strange thing is, the more present we are, the freer we become. Because when we are here, we are no longer dragged by the past or pulled by the future. Then comes connection something modern society is slowly losing. We have thousands of friends online, but no one we can speak honestly with. The busier we are, the lonelier we become. But no one can be free in isolation. Freedom needs witnesses. It needs to be shared. A deep conversation, an unhurried hug, an evening spent together without checking our phones. These small things are the threads that weave us back to ourselves. Some countries understand this well. In Denmark or the Netherlands, rest is not seen as laziness, but as part of a healthy life. People make time for family, for community, for personal joy. They do not live to work. They work so they can live more fully. Such cultures do not create burnt-out individuals, but people with inner space, people who do not have to wait for retirement to feel free. But to reach that state, we need a fundamental shift to accept that we cannot control life. Every plan is fragile. A single event, a storm, a phone call can change everything. And that is not a tragedy. It is the nature of life. When we stop trying to control, we begin to flow. And in that surrender, we discover true freedom. Alan Watts once said that modern humans suffer because they try to hold on to life as if it were a solid object. But life is not an object. It is a process, a stream flowing through our hands. The tighter we grip, the faster it slips away. Only when we open our hands can the water flow through, cool and alive. Likewise, only when we stop clinging to the illusion of absolute security do we see that safety is not control, it is adaptability. Another way to practice this is by learning to pause. To stop does not mean to give up. It means to listen. In the middle of a busy day, pause for a few minutes, look out the window, take a deep breath, or write down 3 things you are grateful for. Pausing does not waste time. It gives time back to you. Over time, these small moments accumulate into a quiet peace no grand plan could ever bring. I once heard a woman say that every morning, before work, she spends exactly 5 minutes sitting still, drinking tea, watching sunlight on the wall. Those 5 minutes, she said, slow down my whole day. Not because she does less, but because she is no longer swept away. Those 5 minutes are a symbol of freedom, small, simple, yet powerful enough to remind her that life is happening right now. In the end, freedom is not about escaping work, responsibilities, or the people we love. It is the ability to be fully present within them. When we work without losing our soul, when we love without demand, when we rest without guilt, that is freedom. We do not need the ocean, retirement, or a grand plan. We have grown used to living with conditions. When I finish this, I'll be happy. But that condition is an illusion. Life does not wait for us to be perfect before it begins. It begins now in the breath you are taking, in the words you are reading, in the simple awareness that you are still here. And perhaps freedom is nothing more than the moment you stop, recognize this truth, and smile. Not because everything is fine, but because you no longer need everything to be fine in order to live. Freedom does not come when we leave our job, nor when our bank account is full. It comes the moment we realize that nothing is stopping us from living, except the belief that we are not yet allowed to. There is a question Alan Watts once asked that sounds simple, but it shakes the very foundation of modern thinking. If money were no object, what would you do with your life? Most of us answer that question with dreams to travel, to paint, to learn music, to write a book, to open a small cafe. But if you look deeper, that question is not about money at all. It is about the mind. Because even when they have everything, many people still live like prisoners, trapped by fear of lack, fear of failure, fear of being wrong. They do not dare to be free, because they have never believed they are allowed to be free. True freedom does not exist in external circumstances. It is a state of being. A person can still work 8 hours a day, still worry, still pay bills yet if they know they are alive. If they can find meaning in the smallest moments, they are freer than millions waiting for the day off. Freedom is not escaping life. It is awakening within it. Imagine a morning. You wake 15 minutes earlier and make yourself a cup of tea. You do not check your phone. You do not open the news. You just watch the steam rise from your cup. The world outside is still noisy. Work still waits. But in that moment, you are completely here. That is freedom, simple, fragile, and available at any moment, if only you pause to notice it. Freedom also lives in small things, in 5 deep breaths before the day begins, in an honest conversation you've been postponing, in a hug you give without expecting anything. It lives in the choice to let yourself be happy, even when life is imperfect. It lives in the decision to live not later, but now. Alan Watts once said, "This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now. And instead of calling it work, realize it is play." When you see that life is not a series of tasks, but a game to be experienced, everything changes. You work not to reach an end, but to live within each movement. You love not to possess someone, but to feel love itself. You exist not to accomplish, but to know that you are here. A man once told me that when he was young, he thought freedom meant escaping responsibility. But as he grew older, he realized freedom was accepting responsibility with joy. When we do what we choose with presence, not from pressure or fear, we are free. The path to that freedom does not begin with grand gestures. It begins with small awareness. Choose one moment each day, the time you are usually most distracted, and turn it into a ritual of presence. It could be when you make your coffee, when you step outside, or when you sit on the bus, watching people pass by. In that moment, let time slow down. Let yourself truly see that you are alive. Then, expand it. Each week, do something for no purpose, no profit, only for the joy of it. Paint, sing, cook, plant, walk, write, or simply sit still. These small, purposeless acts are how you begin to loosen the invisible chains of the productivity culture. A world where everything must be useful, measurable, profitable, because freedom cannot be measured. It cannot be counted in money, weighed in success, or recorded on a resume. It is as light as air, the feeling when you set down a burden you didn't know you were carrying. It is the moment you laugh to yourself for no reason. It is when you realize, I don't have to be anyone else to be alive. And perhaps the final liberation comes when we understand that time is not our enemy, but our companion. We do not need to beat it or race against it. Each passing moment is not something lost, but something given. When we stop measuring time as a ruler for achievement, we begin to see it as a river. And we, simply, must learn to swim in it, without fear, without resistance. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, once wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." True freedom is not what we can do, but how we see what happens. A person confined in a cell but at peace may be freer than someone walking the streets chained by anxiety. Life does not begin after we achieve something. It begins right now, in this breath, in this moment as you read these words, in the fleeting thought you can choose to notice or ignore. Every freedom begins with that choice, the choice to be present. And when you dare to live that way, you no longer have to wait for someday. Every day becomes that day. Every morning becomes a gift. Every breath, no matter how brief, becomes a reminder that you are alive. So if there is one thing you take with you after all these words, let it be this: freedom is not a destination, but the way you walk. And if tomorrow morning you look into the mirror, take a deep breath and whisper, "I'm already here," then congratulations. Because in that very moment, you have begun to truly live. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.